Void Miner, Children of the Belt, Part 3, Chapter 11, Checking In. The derelict station had a heartbeat now, weak, irregular, but steady enough to tell Arg the orphans were beginning to keep it alive. The clatter of boots through the patched corridor no longer startled him. The smell of singed wiring and recycled air no longer carried panic. Even the hum of the patched power core felt different. Less like a dying machine, more like a wounded animal healing under rough hands. They had started calling it theirs. Not out loud, not where he could hear, but Arg saw it in the way they touched the walls, the way they lingered after a repair to admire their own handiwork. They had stopped glaring at him with suspicion every time he gave an order. Now they argued, resisted, tried their own way first. But it was the kind of resistance that grew out of testing trust, not rejecting it outright. Arg was proud of them, though he'd never say it. Instead, he kept his voice flat, his gestures firm, his presence steady. Pride was a luxury. Work was survival. Still, when the shifts wound down and the station's lights dimmed to their meager rest cycle glow, Arg found himself sitting in the widow's cockpit, staring at the comm unit like a man half afraid of what he'd hear. The connection always crackled at first, a mix of static and delay. Kara's voice cut through it, softer than memory, stronger than distance. "You're late," Arg smirked faintly, though she couldn't see it. "Work doesn't keep to schedules out here." "You're avoiding telling me you forgot." Her tone carried humor, but beneath it he heard the strain. The hub wore on her as much as the derelict wore on him. He leaned back in his chair, fingers brushing the worn edge of the console. "How are you?" The pause was brief, but he heard the weight of it there. 3 months now. The medwing says everything looks fine." Arg closed his eyes, imagining her hand resting on her belly, the faint curve of change just beginning to show. "Fine's good." "Fine's ordinary," Kara replied. "And nothing about our lives has been ordinary." The static filled the silence between them, a reminder of how far apart they really were. Arg hated it. He hated that he wasn't there, that he couldn't see her, couldn't keep watch over her the way he did with the children here. But then she laughed, light and unexpected. "Tio reminds me of you, you know." Arg blinked. "Which one's Tio again?" "The one who shadows you everywhere, the one who repeats your words like they're law." Arg grunted, though inside he felt a flicker of something he couldn't hide. Pride, fear, both. "He's learning. They all are." "And so are you," Kara said softly. Her words hit deeper than he wanted to admit. He deflected as he always did. "The guild's still fighting over scraps?" She sighed. "Always. But I've found my place in it. They listen, even when they don't like what I'm saying. Maybe being pregnant makes them pause, like they don't want to be the ones to upset a mother." "Or maybe," Arg said, "you've earned it." Silence again, but this time it was gentler, shared, a quiet acknowledgement of how much they were both carrying, separately, together. Back on the derelict, Arg tasted the orphans' progress. He handed them a failing conduit and watched them patch it without a single spark. He gave them broken trade manifests and listened as they debated barter ratios with more sense than hunger alone. They still stumbled, still fought, still forgot to double-check valves or wasted too much time arguing. But the pieces were falling into place. A group was becoming a crew. That night, laying awake in the widow's narrow bunk, Arg thought of Kara's laugh, of the onboard child growing steady and unseen, of Teo's hands tightening a joint the way he'd shown. And for the first time since boarding this dead station, Arg let himself believe in futures, not just survival, but something more. Kara, too, found herself thinking of the children she hadn't met. Not the ones inside her, though that thought never left her, but the orphans Arg had taken under his care. She pictured them faceless, half-grown shadows, clinging to survival. She wondered if they laughed yet, if they trusted him, if they could see him in the same steadiness she had come to rely on. She placed her hands on her stomach and whispered into the dim of her quarters, "He's learning to be a father before he even meets you." The thought steadied her more than any guild treaty or promise of peace. Chapter 12. Deepening Trust. The station still looked like a husk from the outside. Pitted hull, scorch marks, the long scars of neglect etched deep into its frame. But inside, something had changed. The air still stank of stale filters, but it no longer carried the edge of desperation. The hum of patched power lines, the uneven thrum of life support, even the groan of stressed bulkheads. Together they formed a rhythm. A fragile rhythm, but a rhythm nonetheless. Arg knew what it meant. The children were no longer fighting against the void in a dozen different directions. They were fighting it together. He didn't allow himself to celebrate. He simply noticed. And noticing was enough. The first real test of cooperation came with the air processor. The filters had been clogged for weeks. He'd seen the gray grime choking the screens the first day he boarded. At the time, the orphans had shrugged. "They still work," Kerr had said, arms crossed, daring Arg to argue. But Arg had made a point of revisiting them every few days, tapping the gauges, muttering about pressure and flow. When the time came, he simply handed them tools and said, "Fix them." Ariel immediately snapped back. "We don't know how." "You do," Arg said. "You've been watching, and if you screw it up, we'll all choke together." That silenced her. It wasn't smooth. At first they argued over who held the light, who fetched the spare mesh, who got to cut out the old filters. Voices rose, accusations flew, and twice Arg thought they might abandon the work altogether. But then Teo crouched down, small hands steady, and began unscrewing bolts without waiting for permission. The others fell into step behind him. By the end of the cycle, sweat streaked their faces, grime coated their hands, and the filters slid back into place with the hiss of fresh air. They didn't cheer. They didn't brag. They just looked at each other with something harder than pride, something closer to respect. Arg nodded once, saying only, "Breathe deep." They did, and the silence that followed was its own reward. Food was the next battleground. The orphans had always eaten like scavengers, each hoarding scraps, hiding portions, fighting for every bite. Arg had watched it simmer, waiting for the day hunger tore into knives. So one night, he dropped a sack of ration packs on the table and walked away. No orders, no rules, just food and choice. At first, chaos. Shouting, grabbing, Ariel shoving Kerr nearly swinging back. Arg stood in the doorway, arms folded, face like stone. He didn't move, he didn't interfere. It was Teo again who broke the pattern. He tore a pack in half and shoved a portion at the youngest, a girl barely 8, eyes wide and hollow. She froze, then clutched the food with shaking hands. That act cut through the shouting like a blade. Slowly, grudgingly, others followed. They began trading, splinting, and doling out shares. It wasn't perfect. Kerr still took more than his portion. Ariel still muttered curses under her breath. But when it ended, everyone had food. No one went hungry. Arg let the silence hang, then spoke one sentence. "Keep doing that, and you'll live." They remembered. Kara, back at the hub, was fighting her own battles. The Guild Council had descended into yet another squabble, this time over who had rights to the last functioning drill in one of the outlying mines. Men shouted, women argued, voices echoing in the chamber like the clang of dropped metal. Kara stood at the center, steady, hand resting on the swell of her belly. 3 months, now visible if one looked closely enough. She didn't flaunt it, but she didn't hide it either. Her voice cut through the chamber. A drill in one hand means nothing if the other hand starves. Share the use, or when one of you breaks it, none of you will have it. The argument simmered, then cooled, slowly. Reluctantly, heads nodded. Later, walking back to her quarters, Kara pressed her palm to her stomach. She thought of Arg out there, teaching survival to children who had no one else. And she realized she was doing the same, teaching survival to grown men and women who should have known better. Different faces, same fight. On the derelict, trust deepened further. The children began anticipating each other's needs. When one crawled into a duct, another fetched tools without being asked. When a valve stuck, 2 of them leaned in together instead of bickering over who was stronger. Arg didn't praise them. He just gave them more work. And the more work he gave, the less they resisted. One evening, sitting alone in the widow's cockpit, Arg thought of Kara's voice on the comm, the faint laugh she'd saved just for him. He thought of her belly rounding, of the child that was coming, and he thought of these orphans, their hands dirty, their faces hard, their trust slowly, painfully growing. The connections between the 2 was obvious now. He wasn't just training them to survive. He was training himself to be ready for Kara, for their child, for whatever trial the seed would demand next. That night, as the lights dimmed across the station, Ariel surprised him. She lingered at the door of the widow, arms crossed, chin high. "You're not so bad," she muttered, "for an outsider." Arg raised an eyebrow. "Don't get soft on me." She smirked, sharp and defiant. But then her eyes flicked to the corridor where the younger ones slept, and her voice softened. "They need this. What you're doing, don't screw it up." Arg didn't answer. He only nodded, slow and certain. Because she was right. Chapter 13. Territory and Threats. The derelict's hull groaned as if it disliked being touched, every vibration carrying through Arg's boots as he stepped out into the docking ring. His helmet sealed with a click, the HUD flickering alive, painting faint outlines over shadowed bulkheads and half-dead conduits. The orphans clustered behind him, their mismatched suits dented and patched, some barely rated for vacuum. They shifted on their feet, excitement warring with fear. Arg didn't blame them. EVA runs were never routine. Not for miners, not for soldiers, not for orphans raised on scraps. The void respected no one. "Stay close, stay tethered, stay quiet," Arg said, voice flat against the comm. He let the silence hang until each of them gave a nod, some sharper than others. "You break those rules, you don't get a second chance." Kerr snorted, muffled through the link. "We're not children." Arg didn't even look back. "You are until you prove otherwise." The boy muttered something, but when Arg clipped his tether, Kerr clipped his too. That was enough. The wreck they approached had once been a cargo barge, long stripped by raiders in time. Its hull was torn apart, jagged metal yawning like a broken jaw. Arg led them in slow, boots steady on the hull, tether lines snaking behind. "First lesson," he said, "never trust a wreck." Ariel scoffed. "It's dead." Arg reached out, tapped a loose panel with the edge of his gauntlet. It shifted, metal screaming against metal, sharp shards tumbling into the dark. The younger orphans flinched, breath catching. "Dead things still kill," Arg said. "Rust cuts. Gravity shifts. Pressure pops seals you thought were tight. Treat every wreck like it's waiting to bury you. They listened after that, even Ariel. Inside the barge, their lights cut thin beams through the drifting dust. Ark scanned the walls, noting scorch marks, melted conduits, broken braces. He moved slow, letting the children take in the silence, the sense of weight pressing down, even in zero-G. Second lesson, Ark said. If something looks valuable, assume someone else thought so too, and assume they left a trap behind. Tio drifted close, eyes wide, fixed on the empty cargo netting. What kind of traps? Sharp, simple, final. Arg nudged a floating crate with his boot. Careful. It spun, revealing a cluster of jagged nails hammered crudely into the side. A child's trap. Crude, but effective. The orphans fell silent, faces pale behind their visors. Survival, Arg said, means thinking like someone's desperate enough to kill you over scraps. Because out here, they already are. The group split into pairs, searching the gutted compartments. Arg let them lead, shadowing behind, correcting with curt words when they strayed. Ariel found copper wire and immediately stuffed it into her pouch. Arg stopped her with one word. Log. She glared, but he only gestured at the slate he carried. Everything gets logged. Weight, use, share. Or what? Or I take it from you and throw it out an airlock. Her glare lingered, but she muttered the numbers as he noted them. The others watched, learning without words. They reached the bridge, if it could still be called that. Panels shattered, glass gone, seats scorched black. Arg stood in the doorway, letting the orphans drift inside. Kerr immediately floated toward the pilot's chair, settling into it with a crooked grin. Maybe I'll be captain someday. Arg's voice was sharp. Get up. The boy frowned. It's just a chair. It belonged to someone who didn't make it. Show respect. Kerr's grin faltered. He looked around at the scorched panels, the long-dead station logs frozen on cracked screens. Slowly, he pushed off and drifted back. Teo whispered, voice small across the comm. What happened to them? Arg paused, then answered honestly. They lost. The silence that followed was heavy. By the time they returned to the derelict station, the orphans were quieter. No cocky boasts, no bickering. They unloaded their salvage, wires, bolts, rusted mesh, a few intact panels, and laid it out in neat rows without needing to be told. Ark watched, arms crossed, helmet tucked under his arm. Their eyes were sharper now, not just hungry, but wary in the right way. You want to live? He asked finally. You start by knowing the void wants you dead. That's the only lesson that matters. Every other one grows from that. They nodded, even Kerr. That night, Ark sat in the widow, writing the day's notes into his log. The words blurred as he thought of Kara. He imagined her in the hub, council chamber, standing firm against the shouting miners, hand brushing the small swell of her belly. He imagined her voice on the comm, calm even when she scolded him. He thought of their child, still months away, still unseen, and he wondered if someday he'd be teaching them the same lessons. Never trust the void. Never take survival for granted. Respect what came before. The thought unsettled him, but it also anchored him. At the hub, Kara felt the weight of her own threats. Not jagged metal or rusted airlocks, but ambition and greed. A mining family had claimed a derelict near the hub as theirs alone. Barring others from it, fights had already broken out. She stood in the chamber, exhaustion heavy in her bones, but her voice carried. You think the void respects your claim? The void respects nothing. Share it or lose it all. Murmurs spread, angry and grudging, but they listened. Later, alone, Kara pressed her palm against her stomach and whispered, "He's teaching them too, just different lessons." The child kicked, faint but sure, and Kara smiled through tired eyes. Chapter 14. First Independent Mission. The station's air tasted faintly cleaner now. The processors no longer rattled like death rattles, and the children moved through the halls with a sureness that hadn't been there when Arg first arrived. He'd taught them enough to keep the place breathing. More than that, he'd taught them to keep each other alive. That was why today mattered. The lesson had to change. No more shadowing his steps, no more waiting for his barked orders. They had to stumble, bleed, and learn to stand on their own. Arg gathered them in the docking bay, his voice hard and flat. "Today, you run without me." The reaction was instant. Shouts, curses, and a wave of fear disguised as bravado. Ariel spat first. "You can't leave us out there." "I won't," Arg said, meeting her glare. "I'll watch, but I won't touch a tool, won't pull you back if you drift, won't close a valve if you forget." Dio's eyes went wide. Kerr barked a laugh. No, it rang hollow. "Good, means we don't need you." Arg stepped closer, boots echoing against the deck, towering over the boy. "Then prove it." The mission was simple by his standards. Salvage from a nearby wreck cluster. A handful of old mining drones and cargo containers drifting together, slow in their tumble. For miners, it was routine. For children, it was life or death. They suited up clumsily, tether lines tangling until Ariel smacked Kerr across the helmet and forced him to redo his clips. Arg said nothing. He only checked their seals from a distance, eyes sharp for mistakes. "Docking ring's yours," he said, waving them forward. "Show me you've learned something." The hatch groaned open. The void swallowed them. Arg followed, tethered to the Widow, visor dimmed, staying back. He was a shadow now. No teacher, no protector, only witness. The wreck field loomed ahead, twisted drones, their shells fractured, containers spinning slowly on broken axes. Sunlight glanced off jagged edges, harsh and blinding. The orphans hesitated, clustered too close together. Arg noted it, said nothing. They'd learn soon enough why spacing mattered. Ariel moved first, pushing off with a graceful kick. Her line snapped taut as she drifted toward a half-buried container. "Come on." Tio followed awkwardly, hand shaking on his line. Two younger ones drifted after him. Kerr lingered, scowling, before finally launching himself forward like he wanted to prove something. Arg stayed in the shadows, HUD marking their vitals, his teeth clenched against every mistake. The first lesson hit fast. Ariel reached the container and grabbed hold, but her tether snagged on a jagged seam. She pulled once, twice, and the line frayed against the metal. Panic flared in her breathing, sharp in Arg's ears. Teo's voice cut in, high but steady. "Don't pull. Slack first, then push it off." Ariel froze, then obeyed. The line slipped free. Her breath steadied. Arg exhaled, slow. He hadn't moved. He hadn't needed to. They worked in fits and starts, tethered to wreckage, prying open containers with improvised tools. Copper wire, half-dead batteries, cracked ceramic scraps by any miner's measure, treasure by theirs. Kerr found a sealed crate wedged between two drones. "Help me with this," he shouted. Ariel snapped back. "We're not breaking our backs for your prize." Kerr cursed, straining alone. The crate shifted, then popped free too fast. It spun, dragging him sideways. His tether snapped taut, jerking him hard enough to send him sprawling. He flailed, spinning, breath ragged. Arg's muscles coiled. Every instinct screamed at him to launch forward. But he didn't. He couldn't. This was their lesson. Teo pushed off instead, small hands gripping Kerr's tether. Stop fighting. Let it pull you, then break. Kerr thrashed, then froze, panting, doing as told. The tether slowed his spin. He steadied, boot slamming against the wreck with a clang. For a long moment, the comm was only heavy breathing. Then Kerr muttered, voice low. Thanks. Teo only nodded, cheeks pale behind his visor. Arg let himself breathe again. The mission dragged on, hours of scraping salvage, trading sharp words, fumbling with tools. They fought. They cursed. They laughed nervously when something actually went right. And slowly, the cargo sled filled. By the time they pushed back toward the station, their movements were tighter, more measured. Not polished, not clean, but not chaos either. They had done it, not because Arg carried them, but because they'd carried each other. Back in the docking bay, they unloaded the hull in a heap. Wire, mesh, bolts, even the sealed crate Kerr had nearly died over. The children slumped against the walls, sweat streaked and exhausted. Arg stepped forward, eyes sweeping the pile, then the faces. You lived. His voice was flat, but the words landed heavy. Next time, make it smoother. But you lived. For once, none of them argued. Later, in the quiet of the widow's cockpit, Arg opened the comm. The static cleared, Kara's voice filling the space like breath after a long dive. You sound tired, she said. Not me, Arg replied. Them. First run on their own. Silence, then a soft laugh. And? They came back. He heard the smile in her voice. So will you. Arg's throat tightened. He pictured her hand on her belly, the faint swell of 3 months becoming 4. He pictured the child, waiting. And for the first time in years, he let himself believe she was right. Chapter 15. Crisis and Learning. The station was breathing on its own now. Arg could feel it in the hum of the patch conduits, in the steady rhythm of the recyclers, in the way the children walked the corridors without glancing to him every second. They were carrying more of the load, arguing more about how to do things instead of whether they should bother. It was progress. But progress never came without cost. Arg knew it, had lived it. The ore veins of the belt had taught him that lesson 100 times. Every gain cut out of rock with sweat and broken backs. Every payday weighed against what the void had taken. The children hadn't learned it yet, not properly. That was what the void was about to teach them. The day began like any other, a buzz of voices in the mess, tin bowls scraping as they shoved down reheated rations. Teo's eyes bright with pride as he recounted their haul from the last mission. Ariel rolling her eyes but hiding a smile. Kerr jabbing crude jokes until the younger ones laughed too hard and spilled half their meal. They were starting to act like a crew. Arg sat apart, chewing in silence, watching. He didn't smile, but inside he felt something close to it. He remembered the first days, the suspicion, the snarls. Now there was noise, life, a rhythm to the mess that didn't depend on him. It almost felt safe. The crisis struck during a routine repair, a cracked water line deep in the underbelly of the station. Normally, Arg would have taken point, but he had sent the older ones instead. Ariel, Teo, Kerr. You've patched smaller leaks, he told them. This one's the same, just deeper. Take the kit. Do it together. They had swagger when they left. Arg stayed behind, listening through the comm feed. The underbelly was darker than most sections. Light strips burnt out long ago. Shadows pulled beneath the bulkhead. Pipe groaning under pressure. The hiss of leaking water filled the narrow corridor. "This is nothing," Kerr said, shining his lamp across the drip. "We cut it, slap a seal, done." "Not so fast," Ariel snapped. "We need to bleed the pressure first." Kerr scoffed. "Takes too long." Tio hesitated, voice soft. She's right. If we don't..." Kerr was already wrenching at the valve. Muscles straining, the line shrieked. The hiss became a roar. The pipe burst. Water exploded through the corridor, a jet of force slamming Kerr into the bulkhead. The comm filled with his scream, garbled by static. Teo shouted his name, trying to reach him, but the spray drove him back. Arg was already moving, boots pounding down ladders and narrow passages. His chest burned with every step. He told himself not to run. He told himself they had to learn. But when he heard Kerr's ragged, choking breaths, he pushed harder. He found them in chaos. The corridor was half flooded, water spraying in a wild arc. Ariel was bracing against the walls, arms straining to hold a patch plate in place. Teo clung to her side, trying to wedge the sealant strip under the spray. Kerr slumped nearby, coughing, blood on his lip from where he'd hit the bulkhead. "Move!" Arg roared. The children flinched, but obeyed. Arg waded into the torrent, slammed the valve shut with one brutal twist, and jammed the patch plate into place. His muscles burned, his arms screamed, but the flow slowed, then stopped. Water dripped, steam rising, silence settled heavy. Kerr's eyes went wide, wild. "I had it," he rasped. "You almost drowned in a corridor," Ariel snapped, shaking water from her hair. "Idiot!" "Shut up," Kerr shouted back, voice breaking. Teo stood between them, trembling. We almost lost you." Arg turned, dripping, looming over them. "Listen well." His voice was a growl, the kind that brooked no arguments. "Mistakes kill. You don't get to rush because you're impatient. You don't get to ignore each other because you think you know better. Out here, you only live if you act as one." The words hung heavy. Even Kerr didn't answer. Later, back in the mess, the children sat quiet, bowls untouched. Kerr's lip was split, his pride more wounded than his body. Ariel glared into her food. Teo stared at the floor, hands shaking. Arg let the silence stretch before he spoke. "You survived. Remember how. Next time, you might not." They nodded, subdued. Arg didn't tell them what he thought, that this was the lesson he'd been waiting for, the one no drill or lecture could teach. Fear had tempered them, pain had welded them closer. It was harsh, it was cruel, but it was real. That night, Arg opened the comm. Kara's voice crackled through, soft and weary. "You sound like you've been fighting the station itself." "Kids nearly drowned a corridor today," Arg said. Her gasp was sharp. "Are they..." "They're fine. Shaken. Better for it." Silence stretched. Then Kara whispered, "I don't know how you do it. Trusting them to learn that way?" Arg leaned back, eyes on the dim stars beyond the viewport. "Because one day I won't be here. If they can't stand on their own, they're already dead." He didn't say what else he thought, that he was teaching himself too, that every lesson he hammered into these orphans was practice for the child he hadn't met yet. Kara's voice softened. "Then keep teaching. Both of us need you too." Arg closed his eyes, the weight of her words pressing deeper than the void outside. The end of Part 3 of Void Miner, Children of the Belt.